Next presenter is Dr. Renata Dwan. She is a special advisor in the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. We've heard the initial speakers talk about the value of the technology for SIDS development. And I myself made mention that almost universally, we hear of governments having a thrust towards digital transformation. Certainly at the UN level, there is a very important process that has been ongoing over the past few years at the level of the Secretary General, who published a document a few years ago, Our Common Agenda. And in implementing our common agenda, it has led this year to the development of a Summit of the Future, which would take place in September in New York. And a key document going to that Summit of the Future, which looks at future developments at a global level, is a document which we call the Global Digital Compact. And that would seek to codify commitments that our nations or members of the UN would take up in terms of assuring what I lose the adjective, but appropriate development for all members of the UN family through the use of ICT. And as I said, there is a process ongoing with this, and Dr. Dwan is going to give us an update on this UN process. And subsequent to that, we would look at what the draft of this digital compact is in a little more detail. So I would ask now Dr. Dwan, Special Advisor in the UN's Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, to take the floor to tell us about the GDC process. Dr. Dwan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Casimir, or Nigel, if I may, and yes. Lovely to be with you all, colleagues. I have an origin from a small island state. I come from Ireland, but I'm currently with the UN, so I'm islandless. And in Switzerland right now, where I'm attending the WSIS Forum, the World Summit on Information Society annual forum. And very much, I think, in part of these debates is at the center. The previous two speakers have made my job a lot easier because they've really set out just why digital transformation is so central to the social, the economic development and well-being of people, of communities, and of countries. So I think you've really set out the case of not just often the practical issues, but also the human-centric aspects of people being able to fulfill their potential and their needs by having access to and the ability to access the internet, but also meaningfully access and use through digital literacy and capabilities, and safe. Maybe what I'm going to do is just briefly outline to you what the GDC is and why that might be relevant for SIDS. And then what I'm going to do, because I know Serena is following and she will give you a very detailed reading of all the aspects of this SID. So maybe I'll just take a stand back and say, why now? Why this Global Digital Compact? And many of you will be involved in the Internet Governance Forum. Many of you are involved in the WSIS processes. So you're very aware of what have been the frameworks for multi-stakeholder approaches to the Internet and indeed efforts around digital transformation. I would just flag that, as Nigel noted, the Global Digital Compact idea is not new. It's been around since at least 2020 and the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. And really thinking about why that plays such a part, I think first is the notion that we have really moved away from a focus on connectivity as a physical activity to understanding digital transformation, as Mr. Tupa outlined to us, as a whole of society activity. We need it now, not only so that we are connected, and we are not only engaged in thinking about innovative solutions for small island developing states to have access to connectivity, but we're really thinking about every aspect of our society and every aspect of our digital governance and public services, and indeed our interaction as members of a society navigated through the internet. and through digital technologies and through digital tools. And so in a way, we've moved from being an information society and a knowledge society to really being a digital environment and societies that are using digital transformation for our transformation. I think it's important to keep reminding ourselves that digital transformation and cooperation around digital technologies is ultimately a means to an end. We shouldn't become obsessed with the technology itself. It's what we're trying to achieve with the technology that we need to keep in mind. But it has meant that our governments and our societies need to take a whole of society and whole of government approach to digitalization. And that's often a challenge for us, many of our structures and our societies, and which we tend to operate in silos and for good reason. So really, I think the feature that the Secretary General wanted to put around with global digital cooperation is we've seen in COVID our dependency on these instruments, on digital access. We've seen just the incredible role it can play in allowing us to continue our lives. And for small island states, many have faced existential threat, continuing our identity as citizens of a state. But it's also thrown also the question of harms and really revealed the inequalities. The countries and the societies that were able to participate in the digital economy were able to continue during COVID. The societies and the communities and the groups that weren't suffered hugely and took huge back steps in the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think it showed us the two faces, the yin and the yang. It also showed us the harms of digital technologies if improperly managed and used. And we acknowledge and must acknowledge the incredible challenges that access and universal and meaningful access present for us as societies, for our coherence as a society and for the safety of all individuals in it and the well-being. So I think the Secretary General has felt strongly that we need to renew and revitalize our momentum around global digital cooperation. And we need to do that to do three things. One, to really harness the benefits and address the risks in a really lessons learned of the last 2 decades since the World Summit on Information Society. Two, we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves about some of the limits of our progress in the last 20 years. And that requires a conversation that says, why do we still have 1/3 of the world without connectivity? And why is so much of the 66-67% that is connected partially connected? Or why is it that in African states, the highest rates for digital access and connectivity is higher per capita than in any other developed countries? So there's some real challenges that face us that we need to address. And so I think it was a sense of we need to turbocharge and recommit to some of our connectivity and literacy and functions. The third is that we need to update our digital cooperation. Our digital cooperation that WIS has articulated so eloquently in the Geneva and the Tunis agendas addressed questions of spam, didn't address questions of data, addressed questions of access to everyone, didn't address social media platforms because they were not the Facebook was not only coming into being as a social network in a university at that time. So we have to constantly upgrade how we understand digital technology, and we need a much more agile approach to thinking about how we govern it because it's moving faster than our systems and our abilities at national or international level to keep track. And third, we're dealing with artificial intelligence and the incredible promise that AI offers us to leapfrog the SDGs, to make the catch up, to accelerate progress and development is there. But so too is the real challenge of concentration in an already concentrated digital economy and a world that sees huge divides, including who has access to make value and to generate value in the digital economy. AI risks turbocharging that further. And for SIDS, AI presents particular challenges because if you want to use AI tools as in your public services, you need to have data sets and you need to have representative and sufficiently large data sets to train your AI models to be able to access. So questions of access to large data sets, questions of interoperability, and questions of governance that enable it to be inclusive and participatory and used for development needs are at the forefront of the considerations. So those are some of the three drivers that have really considered, that have led to the Global Digital Compact. As Nigel said, we've been in discussion for over now a year and a half. We've through a series of multi-stakeholder consultations, deep dives looking at various themes. And now we have drafts in front of the member states, and they're beginning to negotiate this Global Digital Compact. I think what I would flag is maybe just of relevance to the SIDS, 3, maybe 4 critical points. The first is the SIDS are mentioned explicitly in the principle on development orientation. So the Global Digital Compact sets out 12 principles to guide digital cooperation. One of them, the very first one, is inclusive. The second one is development oriented. And there it identifies that means targeting the specific digital transformation journeys of least developed countries and small island developing states. So I think there you have that framing in a very key way. The second aspect is it looks at some key objectives that we need to address. The first is closing the digital divides and accelerating progress in the SDGs. There we highlight connectivity, digital literacy, and digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. And I would just flag that there is a call to look at new, more innovative solutions to connectivity for remote and hard to reach areas, so that we need to adapt our ways of thinking, both the financing of them and then the technological means that we're seeking to connect those in, for example, remote island states. And I think what we've tried to do in these areas, these 3 areas, is set concrete targets for achieving alongside the SDGs. So in a way to say to states, you can integrate these digital goals as part of your SDGs. So I think inclusion is a critical theme running through the Global Digital Compact. And perhaps the second objective, which is an expanding inclusion in the digital economy, is really trying to address the issue of what is the enabling environment for developing countries to participate in the digital economy? What is the enabling environment that allows for fair practice to engage? What are the frameworks required to allow small and medium enterprises to participate? And that, I think, is going to be another critical area for SIDS. I think I won't go through all the objectives because I know that Serena will do a very thorough job in that area. I would just highlight maybe 3 other ones in addition to inclusion. I would say interoperability is a theme running through the Global Compact. And that is a question not only because of its potential to enable smaller states or more remote states or all communities to participate in the benefits in the digital economy, but particularly in order to ensure that it's affordable and accessible, because interoperability helps drive down costs. And that argument that interoperability is not just about efficiency, but also about inclusion and participation is one that we feel strongly about. Linked to the interoperability is a strong reference and call for the development of open source standards, software, platforms, models, and tools. Now, I don't want to be overly idealistic about open source options. We know that they must come with safeguards. We know that they must come with the appropriate safety and security aspects. But when developed with those standards in mind, they can be critical drivers for developing countries to get at a market fair price or free access to huge digital solutions and tools. So I think there's a strong pitch in there for digital public goods and that facilitation of interoperability. And the third, there's a proposal in the text for an initiative or process to start amongst governments to look at data governance principles, standards and definitions on data, options for data exchanges and data representation, so that countries can have access to data for their development needs, but also that they can exchange with data so as to build the sorts of data sets that we need for looking at environmental solutions, looking at natural disasters, agricultural planning, education and long-term family planning. How you use and have access to those data sets is going to become critical and is a critical issue for the SIDS, as you know better than I. Fourth, I would say, in addition to the inclusion, or third, in addition to the inclusion and the interoperability, I would flag the sustainability aspect. And here I would say we still have some work to do. I think there's a critical interest in having a framing around the importance of sustainability of digital cooperation and governance, but some caution from some countries around how much they wish to commit to devices being carbon neutral, to looking at options, to look at e-waste, to look at options of principles for the design and the development of technologies that are more environmentally supportive. And that's partly because I think at this moment, as we develop AI with the huge amount of energy and water resources required for that, that has led to some caution in that space. So I would just flag that sustainability is there, but I think we need to really look at that dimension. And in particular, how do we measure environmental digital technologies? How do we know how to make progress, and how can we begin to communicate on that? And finally, I'll make a pitch that the global digital cooperation tries to look at a framework for international cooperation on artificial intelligence. And I think at the root here is a question of whether the international community believes that AI should be a topic addressed by all states in an inclusive and participatory way, or whether it's an issue best dealt with by states with those capabilities. And I think the question and the views of the Secretary General and many of the advisory body on AI that he has is that it's critical we have an inclusive and global participation in the questions of AI governance from the outset, and not as an add-on later when frameworks are in place, when systems are in place, and when governance arrangements are in place, because there is a risk that we don't address the needs then of those most likely to benefit from AI and most likely to fall behind if they don't have access to those technologies. So it includes a proposal for a scientific panel on AI. It includes that would produce horizon scanning reports so that all countries can have access to trends and development. It includes the idea of an annual dialogue on emerging governance approaches to AI that all governments could participate in, and together with experts and multi-stakeholders, so that there is a sense of understanding and exchange right from the outset of what are these emerging AI approaches. Third, there's quite a call for international partnerships on capacity building, and in particular areas around what is the scope for collaboration across and between countries like SIDS, regional neighbours, to develop the data, the compute capacity that is highly resource intensive, and the talent that can navigate the potential for AI. Alongside that, there's a proposal for a fund to support AI and SDGs to fund some of those collaborations, and in particular, the generation of large data sets. So I'll conclude by saying that much of this, especially around connectivity and digital literacy, is not new for you. You'll be very familiar with these issues and you deal with them every day. What I think the Global Digital Compact can do is mobilize and renew that commitment to digital cooperation, as well as set a roadmap for the governance as we go forward of emerging technologies, including but not limited to AI. And can we harness that early in the public interest and for development priorities, as opposed to constantly play catch up as we seek to engage with that? So I very much hope that the SIDS can see in the Global Digital Compact issues that pertain to you. I think there is a question that some have raised: will this be multi-stakeholder? I don't think it's possible to have digital cooperation, and certainly not possible to have digital governance if we don't have the participation of all stakeholders. And I think it makes a strong pitch in that direction. But we will need everyone's active participation if we are to go toward an ambitious Global Digital Compact at a time of geopolitical divides, and at a time where there's caution about how much we wish to commit to resources for digital for development. So very much hope that we can engage as going forward. And thank you for your participation and listening to me today.
Yes. Thank you very much, Renata. I think that was quite a good overview. One of the last things you mentioned was participation, global participation. So with the GDC right now, how might one participate in its further development? Is it just via the website, or is there any other thing that you would suggest?
So that's a great question, Nigel. What I would encourage you to do, and I certainly could be in contact with your teams, to participate in the regular multi-stakeholder updates on the GDC. These have been underway for many years, and in fact, multi-stakeholders were invited to contribute into an open call for participation, views on what they thought the compact should look like, what it should address, key priorities for it. They were invited to comment in writing on the draft itself, the outline, and on the draft. We've now moved into this more sort of intergovernmental phase. But the co-facilitators, which are the governments of Sweden and Zambia, are very keen to continue regular updates from multi-stakeholders. And you would have a chance to participate and engage in that discussion. And I'd be happy to make sure that you're on the mailing list for the next multi-stakeholder consultation. I'd encourage you also to work through your IGFs. The IGF has been a very active participant, the leadership panel, the MAG, national IGFs have participated, youth networks have participated in the multi-stakeholder consultations. And then finally, I'd encourage you to participate in your, through your governments. Really engage with them to make sure that when they sit at the negotiating table, they bring your priorities and they bring the issues that are central for those of you who are practitioners and will really up close understand what some of the challenges are. I'd make a plea too, to help us keep the level of ambition high. I think whenever we negotiate with 193 states, the tendency to arrive at somewhat of a sort of lower level is always there. There are many other different priorities. But could I just flag that one thing that I've really heard from Singapore and other states has been this idea that it will be critical to think about moving from the SDGs to a digital agenda environment. So the future of the SDGs post-2030 will have digital front and center of it. And this is a way that we can begin that process already. So every action listed in the tasks in the Global Digital Compact is referenced to which SDGs it's talking about. So I think that would be really great to have ways that you could participate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Renata.